What if I told you the challenge you face is only an illusion? The challenge you face is only as big as you perceive it to be. Welcome to a mind-bending journey where you'll get to discover that you have a superpower, the ability to resize your problems. Let me ask you a question. Would you consider the cabin in this picture big or small? Okay, do you have your answer? My answer is it depends. If you look at the cabin and compare it to a grain of sand, that cabin is huge. Instead, if you look at the cabin and you compare it to the size of the earth, it's small. So whether something is big or small, difficult or easy, it's how we compare it to other things. The principle of relativity states that the perception of an object's properties, such as its size, importance, or difficulty, is not an absolute, but is instead determined by its relationship to other objects or concepts. This is huge because what it tells us is if we see something as easy or hard, difficult, challenging, whatever it might be, it's because we are comparing it to other things. And if those comparisons are working against us, we're going to find it harder and more difficult. If the comparisons are working in our favor, it's going to be easier and more manageable. In this picture, you are small and the problem is huge. And if we were to zoom out on that, and if we saw that you were actually going uphill, this problem will really be a problem because you're smaller than the problem. In this case, you have inertia working against you. When something is bigger than you and you run into it, it stops you. You just can't move past it. Imagine if you were a little bug and you got hit by a car, it's just going to smash you, right? Now, if the bug was 100 times bigger than the car, when the car hit the car would have problems. So the size of it and the inertia of it is huge. And when you can become bigger, and I'm going to go through how you can do that, but when you can become bigger, then you have the inertia ability to get moving and rolling here rather than you being a little pebble and running up against a huge, massive object. And then what's going to happen? You're going to stop, you're going to procrastinate, and you're going to say, I don't even know if this is possible. When you look at this image here, you see you are big and the problem is small. Now, this problem is no problem, especially as we look at it, we zoom out and we see now you're going downhill. So that would just be a minor speed bump on your way. So a key point right here is that you are either expanding and shrinking yourself, and at the same time, you're either expanding or shrinking the problem. And just as we looked at in the beginning with is the cabin big or small, it depends on what you're comparing it to. So if you can get it so that you expand yourself and you shrink your problem, it's going to be more doable, you're going to feel more capable of doing it, and you're going to get that momentum working in your favor. Here's the kicker. Sometimes we inadvertently make these problems bigger than they need to be. We catastrophize. We overgeneralize. We try to make it be where we have to be perfect in order to get this done. All that does is basically make the problem bigger than what it is. Anytime we see it as harder, more challenging, bigger, it's got to be perfect, then what that does, it just expands the problem. The good news is that once you're aware of these, you can flip the script and have this work in your favor. Remember, the size of your problem is not set in stone. So you might be asking, that sounds great, but how do I actually go about changing this and having this work for me rather than against me? The first way is size manipulation. What you want to do is do some things where you visualize yourself becoming bigger, stronger, and then you see your problem becoming weaker and smaller. The more certainty you have about the problem being massive and huge, the less certainty you're going to have about your own capabilities. But if you can put some doubt and shrink that problem, by the same time expanding yourself, it's going to help a lot. Now, some people, what they use is they see themselves as a giant. And just by the fact that they're growing and turning into a big giant, when they look at the problem, proportionally, the problem gets smaller. Now, you can also shrink the problem and expand yourself, and both of those together will just make this go faster. Second is a perspective shift. If you were to elevate up and get a bird's eye view, you're going to see a lot more of what's going on, and you're not just going to be pigeonholed into this little view that you're seeing. So getting that elevated view can help you. Now, if we look in history for an example, we can think of Nelson Mandela, and he was in prison for 27 years in South Africa, but he saw that as a larger story. As he elevated up and looked and saw a bigger perspective, he didn't just see it as one man going to jail, he saw it as helping his people become free, freeing his nation. And so that right there is an example of him elevating up, looking around, saying, this is bigger than me, there's more going on, seeing more of the picture. And that is a great way to do this, is to take that bird's eye view and see, what else am I missing, what else is available, how can I change the perception of this just by seeing more of what's there. Third, you can deconstruct the problem and break it into smaller, manageable pieces. I don't know if you remember, but on the Apollo 13 mission in 1970, they had a catastrophe when the oxygen system crashed. And they had to figure out how to get this all working. But if you looked at the whole thing, like if NASA had to figure it all out all at once, it was like way too much. But if they broke it down into pieces, like how are we going to get oxygen and food? How are we going to get the power of the system up? How are we going to make sure communication is still working? And they broke it up into pieces, then each piece was more manageable. So again, sometimes if you have a big problem, instead of seeing it as this big, huge problem that's just massive, if you break it up into smaller little pieces or boulders or chunks, then it's a lot more doable and you don't get so stressed out. The fourth one is the environment. How is the environment and your envisioning of it working for you or against you? I know sometimes as a basketball coach, players would think of the other team as, man, they're all this and that and everything else. But how do you know if the other people were sick that day? How do you know if they had a strained leg? Okay, you don't know all those things. But a lot of times what we do is we assume that they are in ideal, perfect condition. And in this right here, make this work for you rather than against you. So see things working for you. See it being a sunny day instead of a cloudy, gloomy day if you're trying to climb up a hill. See things working for you. And you can see the support that you need. You can think of encouraging people around you. Anything in your environment that's going to impact you positively and make the problem or task or goal you're trying to accomplish easier, then that works. So some people use things like they hear their dad in their head talking to them, encouraging, or they hear someone else who's positive. And they do not focus on the things that are going to be negative. So if your dad was negative and cranky and giving you all kinds of bad ideas, then you wouldn't want to be playing that right now, because that's going to shrink you and expand your problem. But if your father was someone who gave you love and encouragement, then listening to him is going to expand you and shrink the problem. But you want to have it so that your environment, everything that you see, is actually working and supporting and helping you by making it easier to get this done. The fifth way you can help yourself is by distancing. If you are stressed out about someone and they're right next to you, is it going to make you feel good or stressed? But if you saw them 100 miles away, it wouldn't probably be as big of a deal. So the closer something is to you, the more of an impact it has. Now, in one of my other videos, I talk about penny problems, and in there I said, like, if you take a penny and you look at it, it's not that big. But if you get it closer and closer to your eye, all the way up here, and especially if I was to close my other eye, like this penny, like, just takes over my whole thing. And it makes it seem like this penny is huge. But the more distance I can get on it, the smaller it becomes. Now, is the penny actually changing in size? No. So what we have to do is think of things sometimes as putting some distance. And if I was to set this penny down and look at it and walk away, eventually would this penny become so small I don't even see it? Yes. And the same thing can happen with you. If you are seeing something that is holding you back, stopping you, making this seem bigger and more impossible to do, then what you want to do is separate some distance. And you can do that mentally by mentally seeing it going away from you. If you notice in the last video we talked about the leaf going down the river. Well, that leaf going down the river is going to get smaller and smaller as it goes away too. So any way you can do this to help you distance it, it will help you. All right, let's look at some real examples of how you could apply this in your life. One way to help you make yourself feel bigger and the problem smaller is through affirmations. I am bigger than any problem I face. Other affirmations can be, I am capable and confident. That can work on things like relationships you have, interactions with your boss, whatever it might be. Simply telling yourself, I am capable and confident will help you. Because one of two things will happen. One, you'll either keep saying, I am capable and confident and believe it and start having it be a truth for you, or you'll stop doing it and saying, oh, this is nonsense, it doesn't work. But you will never know unless you do it. And most people who are at the top of their game, they are not saying negative things to themselves. They're saying positive things. Just like if you want a healthy body, you don't eat junk food all day and then hope that somehow you have this magnificent body. The same thing is with your mind. You have to feed it things that are positive and supporting. And so saying things like, I am capable and confident are one of those ways you can do that. Another example that people find helpful is when they have some kind of conflict, and what they see it as is like big cables, big huge steel cables all tied together in a knot. And they're not getting anywhere. They're not changing the other person's mind. They're not getting any better. It's just kind of like gridlock with these steel cables all tied together. But if you can visualize those steel cables metamorphosizing into string or yarn or something smaller, and then you can untangle it easier, then the problem wasn't quite so big. So again, these are just different types of ways you can take something that might seem overwhelming, huge, and make it more manageable. Because like, there's no way I have enough strength to tear apart steel cables or things like that. But if those steel cables were to shrink down and they were to become string, then I could figure out, okay, where's the knot starting here? How can I work on that? So this is just another different mental activity you can use to help you kind of untangle and shrink these problems and make them more manageable. And I love mantras, and so a great one here is, I am capable and confident of resolving conflicts. Let's look at how you can apply the bird's eye view. We're all going to have ups and downs. So when you hit one of those down periods, what you can do is elevate and expand and then see more, like we talked about. So let's say you have a career setback and it seems devastating, right? But if you were to elevate, step back, look around, you might see some other opportunities. You might see where you have the ability to improve your skills. So it doesn't have to be necessarily devastating. The other thing is, let's say you have a personal conflict with your spouse, your partner, or someone at work. You can also see this as, when I elevate and expand and look around, who else is involved, what else is going on, what are the other dynamics going on, and can I come out of this actually stronger because I went through this conflict, I saw it. Just like weightlifting, you get stronger by weightlifting. So you don't get stronger by avoiding conflicts, you actually get stronger by leaning into it and embracing them. Because maybe I have a better understanding of the other person, maybe a better understanding of myself. But whatever it is, I've improved. I've gotten bigger by embracing it rather than running away from it. And the other thing on a bird's eye view is, if you have a financial difficulties, sometimes that, again, by expanding, looking around, you can learn some other things like investing, budgeting. Most people don't know a lot about investing. So if you hit rock bottom or you have some kind of troubles, why not use that as an opportunity to springboard yourself into becoming more financially literate? Let's say you feel like you're in this maze or this obstacle course and you can't quite figure it out. Well, if you're at the ground level, when you're in a maze, all the walls are going to be right there. You can't see over them or anything like that. But if you could elevate just slightly, you're going to see a little bit more. Maybe not the whole maze, but you're going to see a bunch more. And the same with the obstacle course. If you could just elevate up a little bit, you'd see a little more of the terrain, see what's going on. Now, if you could elevate even further and get up in a bird's eye view, you could see the whole thing. And then you're going to see which path to take, which areas to go, where there's just dead ends this way, rather than wasting your time. So this thing here is elevating. What you're doing is, instead of seeing the wall, like the painting, like right in your face, you are getting some distance, you're elevating up, you're seeing the solutions. Maybe you don't even have to go in the maze. Maybe you can go around it or go over it. Or you can shrink it down and then be a giant and step over it. But there's always a solution, and the more creative we are, the more that we can see these different possibilities, the more options we're going to give ourselves. Most of us say, when I ask people, like, how many things did you try to do this? They'll say, I tried everything. I mean, okay, well, list off all the hundreds and thousands of things you did. And they're like, well, I didn't do that many. Okay, well, list off 100. Well, I didn't do 100. Well, 25, and you get down to it, maybe they did 1 or 2 things. So this right here is just giving you different ideas to expand your awareness, expand possibilities, expand different things that you can try and do that can help you so that you don't get stuck. I know it might be hard for you to believe this, but you have a lot of irrational beliefs. I do too. And these irrational beliefs really hinder and limit us. And one thing to ask yourself is it true? So whatever you're believing, say, is it true? And is it always true? Because if you can chip away at that certainty and get rid of some of these irrational beliefs, it will help you a lot. We were not born with all these irrational beliefs. We've learned them all. So anything you've learned, you can unlearn. But people say that learning is hard. I say unlearning is harder. Because once you developed a habit, it's hard to undo that. But if you have the willingness, the desire, you can do it. Just have patience with yourself and know that unlearning some of these irrational beliefs I have will actually help me. And then what that will do is it will shrink the problem and expand me. Because once I get rid of irrational beliefs, like if I fear something around the corner, but there's nothing around there, but I fear it so I don't go through the door, that's an irrational belief that's stopping me. But if I can move past that and see the truth, then, as they say, the truth sets you free. Another area to be aware of is learned helplessness. Remember, whatever you focus on expands. So if I focus on all the ways I'm inadequate, helpless, unable to do something, incapable, I'm just going to expand that. I'm actually going to become less capable, right? I'm going to become more helpless. So remember those things and ask yourself, is this making me more confident, stronger, bigger? Or is this making the problem bigger, stronger? There was an experiment in the late 1960s called the Pygmalion effect. And in that, what happened was a teacher was told that, hey, these students are bright and brilliant. These students over here, well, not so much. Now, the truth of the matter was it was just randomly selected kids. But that expectation of you are a brilliant, bright person, it impacted the teacher, it impacted the student, and they had different results than the ones that they thought, well, these are the dumb kids, or they're not as well, or they can't make it. So remember that what you expect from yourself, what others expect from you, if your standards are low, you're going to have low expectations. If you can raise your standards, raise your expectations, raise your belief in yourself, it's more likely to become true, because the self-fulfilling prophecy is something that happens. And we are believing ourselves into our future. So whatever future we're believing that into existence. and we can believe a more positive, supportive future, or we can believe a more limiting, negative future. I want you to imagine something. Imagine that all the skills, abilities, things you have are a bunch of colorful building blocks. And right now you have those building blocks arranged in a certain way. So you can be a certain way. You can do certain things. But if you had some kind of a setback or you wanted to make a change, how could you take those building blocks and reform them into a different shape? So let's say right now, I'm thinking of like Legos and that kind of stuff, but let's say you had all these Legos or these building blocks and you had it right now built as a house. Could you reconstruct that and turn it into a bridge? Could you reconstruct that into something else? So it's the same with you. We have all these building blocks, all these pieces, all these elements of us, and we can reconfigure them in a different way. Now, why does this matter? Because you get stuck when you think this red block is only the door, or this green is only the window, or whatever it might be. But when you can reconfigure them, it'll open it up. Because the more creative you can be, the more just open and expansive you can be about options, it gives you more possibilities. The fewer possibilities you have, the fewer options you have, it limits you down, and that's what gets you stuck. And the more you can expand that and see, oh, I could do this, I could do that. I know one thing for me that I find really helpful is taking something from one area and then mixing it in with a different area. So how can you reconfigure these different skills and abilities you have in ways that serve you and help you? Let's say you have a big decision to make and you're not sure what to do. Imagine two doors. And these two doors, one is staying pat and staying where you are. The other door is taking this different opportunity and going down there. Then what you do is you visualize yourself down the road 20 years. So imagine that these two doors are on this timeline. So you elevate up, you look down, you see the two doors. One path keeps you on your current timeline. The other one puts you on the new timeline. And then feel into it and see, like, do I feel excited and do I enjoy this, or do I have regret? Is there one of these paths that I wish I could choose? One of the guys I had that was a mentor told me that when you're making a decision to flip a coin, and I thought, what kind of advice is this? He said, yeah, flip a coin and say heads it's A and tails it's B, and then whatever the choice is. So I flipped the coin, looked at it, and then he's like, did you like how it turned out? Yeah, I liked it. He's like, okay, that was a good choice, right? So flipping the coin worked. And then I flipped it another time. Did you like how that choice was? No, I actually wish it would have gone the other way. Perfect. Now pick that other way. So sometimes doing something silly like that, like flipping a coin and then deciding, well, which way did I really want it to go, can help you make a decision. And looking at these two doors and seeing them as a small part of your timeline and then looking out the whole thing, you can see like, okay, this is just one decision, and how does that play out? What way do I like? And it can help you to move forward and not get stuck. I shared some different ideas on how to resize things and make problems smaller and yourself bigger. Play with these, see which one works, see if maybe the bird's eye view elevating up works or the other ones work for you. But remember, it all comes down to what works for you. What works for me may or may not work for you. Be your own experimenter, be your own tester, see what works for you. And sometimes what works now doesn't work later. I know for myself, foods I like now, maybe 5 years from now I won't like. I'm always changing, and the same thing is true with you. But when you do these different things and you expand your ideas, expand your possibilities, don't think that the simpler idea isn't better. Now, I got a story right here, and it's a little probably part fiction and a little bit of truth, or it could have been a lot of bit of fiction and no truth. But it's a story about how NASA was trying to figure out how can we get a pin to work in space with zero gravity. And they spent millions of dollars how to figure this out. And they ended up with a solution But the Russians at the same time figured out, well, they knew how to do that. And that was just use a pencil. And so sometimes we think, oh, it's got to be this big, complicated process. It's got to be all these steps. We've got to figure all this stuff. But maybe it's just like the pencil. The answer is already in your hand or right near you. So don't try to make this more complicated than it is. Look and see all the possibilities. But sometimes you're going to get the simple, easy answer, and that's perfect. Go with that one. Before we conclude, I have a story for you, and it's designed to kind of encapsulate all the ideas that we put in here and help you to remember it easily. I know for myself, I can remember a story easier than I can all these stats and facts and that kind of thing. In a small village nestled in the mountains of feudal Japan, there lived two young samurai, Hiroshi and Kenji. Both were tasked by their daimyo to build a bridge across the turbulent river that had long divided the region. Hiroshi approached the task with dread. Each day he would stand in the riverbank, overwhelmed by the rushing waters and seemingly impossible task ahead. He made little progress, constantly complaining about the river's strength and the inadequacy of his tools. Kenji, however, began his work with quiet determination. Yet as weeks passed, even his resolve started to waver in the face of numerous setbacks and the daunting nature of the task. Sensing their struggles, the village elder, Master Takeshi, known for his wisdom and skill in bamboo crafting, invited both samurai to join him. "Your challenge is great," Master Takeshi acknowledged, "but your perception of it is what truly determines your path." He handed each of them a piece of bamboo and said, "When you feel overwhelmed, hold this bamboo. Close your eyes and imagine you are this bamboo." Confused, Hiroshi and Kenji looked at him questioningly. Master Takeshi smiled and explained, "Bamboo bends with the storms but does not break. It's flexible yet strong. When the winds howl, it doesn't resist, it dances. When you face your challenge, be the bamboo. Bend, adapt, but do not break. See the force of the river not as your enemy, but as your partner in your dance." Then he taught them a simple technique. When the task seems too great, hold your piece of the bamboo, close your eyes, and take a deep breath and whisper, "I am bamboo." Feel yourself becoming flexible, resilient, and strong. Open your eyes and approach your work anew. Kenji took this lesson to heart. Each morning he would hold his bamboo, center himself with the mantra, and approach his work with renewed flexibility and creativity. He began to see the river's power as a tool rather than an obstacle, incorporating its flow into his design. Hiroshi initially scoffed, but seeing Kenji's progress, decided to try the technique. Gradually, his perspective shifted. The roar of the river, once overwhelming, became a source of inspiration. Months passed and both samurai made significant progress. When the bridges were finally completed, they stood as testaments not just to engineering, but to the power of resilient thinking. Years later, when faced with challenges, the villagers would often remind each other to be the bamboo, a simple yet profound reminder to remain flexible, resilient, and in harmony with the obstacles they faced. Remember the relativity principle. Everything is relative. And have that relativeness work in your favor rather than against you. See your problems as smaller. Come up with different ways to do that. If you need more ideas, I have a whole bunch more ideas. If you also want to shrink your problems, so expand yourself and shrink your problems. Consider creating a perspective toolkit where you have different ideas that you can use and call upon when you need them. I've shared a bunch of them in here. Maybe there's 2 or 3 of them that you liked and you could put that in your perspective toolkit, and then when you needed it, you could have it. Remember the quote by Benjamin Franklin, "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." A few of these tools that you have handy, maybe in your phone or a notebook, can really make the difference so that you don't get stuck on a big problem. One of the coolest things about all this is that you control this. You control the perspective that you see. You control how big or small things are, how big or small you are, and that's an incredible power. Do not underestimate how powerful that is, and use this to your advantage. All too often, too many people shrink themselves and expand their problem. And if you could just change that around, that would make a huge difference in your life today and moving forward. Here's a question for you to ponder. What problem have you been allowing to overshadow your success? And what specific steps will you take to shrink it down to size starting today? If you like this video, check out my more than 100 other videos out there. Specifically, I'd recommend penny problems if you like this video and you want to go in more depth.